You've got two things to do by the 27th, so you have a fair bit of time to get them done. We haven't done templates yet, so I'm going to do templates now. And your first lab is to create two templates. One, a metric version, and one, a US version. So I'll go over both of those. Also, adjust your dimension style for the metric one so it doesn't look so wonky. So we'll do that, and then you just have an orthographic projection for the second. So those are here, week 7. So this is the two templates, and this is the lab. So I'll look at the lab after we get a couple templates made, after I walk through how to do that. The templates are supposed to have two layouts. So you kind of got to understand the difference between a template and a layout. We've done layouts. Those are those tabs, right, in AutoCAD, where we produce our PDF or our drawing, make it look just right. Layouts where the title block is. So you shouldn't have to remake your title block. You should be able to just copy and paste it in. That'll be a little problematic with the metric version, but you can do it. So I'll walk you through that. And then it says dimension style adjustments as needed, especially for the metric. So this upload will just be two templates. Inside the templates will be an A size and a B size layout. So let's go through them. Any questions so far? We've not done templates, right? Right, we've done a metric drawing, correct? Okay, so the way you make a template is just start a new drawing. Okay, so when you go file new, it asks you what template you want to use. You can see that I have one of my templates in here. If you want a metric drawing, you use ISO. If you want a US drawing, you use ACAD. Okay, so that's the difference in setting up a metric and a US. I'll do the ISO and set up the metric version because you're going to have more tweaking to do with the dimension style with the metric version. Okay, so now it is thinking millimeters, not inches. Okay, so you're going to want your layouts set up to A and B size paper. They're both coming to you at A size. When I click back and forth, the size of that paper doesn't change, right? It's a strange size in the metric system. It's some metric version of paper. So what I suggest is you actually change them both by doing your page setup manager, modify, and get rid of this ISO A4 size paper, because that printer actually won't understand it. If I go to print it, it'll be like, what the hell's that, right? So even in the metric version, you might want to set it up to like an ANSI style piece of paper, because it will understand that. A size is the 8.5 by 11. B size is the 11 by 17. Okay. I think that's really the only option. Yeah. So notice, because it said full bleed, it doesn't have the printer dotted line, right? So if you then go back into there and set up a printer, it'll then bring that into line. So if you want to, in here, you could have it print PDF, or it's this document writer thing, is that thing. Oh no, it's actually this one, the Saint Serums. I don't know if you can see that or not, but if you do, that will give you the dotted line if you want that. Which you probably should, right? Because when you produce the PDF, that's what you're going to see. Then these are called viewports. If you don't remember that, you want to drag those out and get those as big as possible, because that's your drawing space, right? So now you have a nice big drawing space. Whatever you draw in here, I'll just throw a rectangle on that is 5. Yeah, so that's 5,5. Remember, what are the units? Millimeters. Yeah, that's why it's like disappeared on you, right? There it is, 5,5. That's 5 millimeters by 5 millimeters. So a millimeter is pretty small, right? All right. So then when I go into here, it's there somewhere, right? So if you use the command zoom and then A for all, it'll bring it in somewhere. Where is it? Okay, let's see it. Oh, you see it? Oh, there it is. Wow. So tiny. Thanks. All right, there it is. And if we go ahead and use our scale to determine like what we're going to do, that's 1-to-1 scale, which makes sense because it's 5 millimeters on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. So if you're ever wondering like, am I really in metric or not? Just go into here, go to your viewport, do it 1-to-1, and it should look tiny on a piece of paper. If it was 5 inches, that would be near half the page, right? A substantial difference between. All right. Then you'll want to set up your title block. Again, go get your title block from wherever you created it. Go into layout, this view, highlight it all and do Control-C and then bring it in here and do Control-V and you can bring your title block in. It'll come into the metric template 25 times smaller, right? Because this is metric. You may have to scale it by 25 times. You could just recreate it if you want, but you don't have to, right? But each layout should have a title block in it. Again, just working with a normal drawing here, nothing's changed. What changes is when you save it. You're going to save it as a template, right? And all the settings in this drawing will be saved as a template. Okay. So there's a lot you should do before you create your template, but at any time you can open that template and add settings to it, right? When we get into layers, I haven't had you do layers yet, but then layers would become part of your template. So you wouldn't have to make those every time if you want to use layers, right? The dimension style, any tweaking that you want to do to that gets saved in your template. So you don't have to like do that every time you come in, right? Any setting that you put into this drawing and then save it as a template will be there for you in the future, which is why we do it. All right, I would rename these layouts. I wouldn't leave them layout 1 and 2. So there's a rename button and it just highlights the layout, right? I'd probably call it a size metric or something like that. And then I would change this one by modifying the page setup manager. Reason is not modifying it. Oh, I got to get it active. Thanks. I was just going to copy the first one, so forget it. All right, then modify this one and we'll set this one to be 11 by 17. When you hit OK, you'll see it change. I could set the printer up again and get that to show up. Get your viewport out big because you want to use all the B-size paper. Kind of activity going on out there. Exciting, right? So now I have an A size and a B size. Rename that one too. All right. There's 2 layouts in one drawing, right? The other thing you're going to want to do with the metric, when you go to dimension this, it's going to use the metric style, right? Oh, maybe I already tweaked it. Oh, no, that's right. That's the metric style, which is a little different than the US ANSI style. In other words, the 5 is not inside the arrows, for example. And if there was a circle, I think maybe there was some struggles with this last time. And I go ahead and use a radius dimension, it does that, right? And notice that the decimal is a comma. So that's all metric version. Normally, we're not going to want to do that. Even in a metric drawing, we're not going to want that, okay? So when you go to your template, get it off of ISO 25 for the standard, right? The dimension style. That's not what we want. So when you click on these, you get a feel for what it looks like. Annotative is also driven off of the ISO standard. See, it says it right down here. Everyone see that? Yeah. Standard is not driven off of the ISO style completely. There's been some changes to make it look like a little more like US, right? So you could use the standard, but it's not annotated. That's a problem because we want to use the annotative because that's going to do the scale factor for us. Okay. You can make dimension styles. Probably already saw that. You can do new. And you can base your style off of something else. So I want to base it not off the ISO. I want to base it off a standard, and I want to make it annotated. So this is going to be a standard style, but it's going to be annotative, right? And I'm going to call it something like ANSI, which is the US version of dimensioning style. ANSI is what we call it, American National Standards Institute. I might call it metric or something, right? So then I'll continue. And this is that new style. Now, because you're in metric, it pulled in all the dimensions from the US. This is interesting. But that's like in the text, it says, oh, it's like 0.18. That's 0.18 millimeters because it is metric. It's thinking millimeters, which is just microscopic, right? So you still need to put in like the metric version of 1/8 of an inch, which would be like 3 millimeters. And unfortunately, there's other kinds of settings that are just fractional millimeters. They're tiny. In other words, if I say, okay, and I'm going to set it current, my new dimension style, and now I'm going to dimension, it looks better, but look at the arrows. Like, what is happening here, right? So, yeah. And I don't have any annotative factor going. So let's see what it looks like if I get an annotative factor going. So this is a tiny little thing. What's got to happen here for a scale? Do I want to reduce it more? Or do I want to enlarge this thing? I want to enlarge it. See what 4:1 looks like. Yeah, it's pretty small. These are going to go away. Let's go 8:1. All right, 8:1, I like it. Now that new dimension style is annotative. I'm going to make sure I still have it going. I do that often just because I think AutoCAD changes it sometimes on me, right? So now I need to set my scale factor to the same, 8:1, and then I'll just put a dimension on. We'll see what we get. All right, it's looking better, but look, the arrows are still not, it's still like 0.1 millimeter, and then it's factoring it up 8 times to 0.8 millimeters or something. It's still tiny. So you really have to get in there and fuss with a couple things in your dimension style in the metric version to make it work nicely. In other words, you might go into arrows and say, okay, arrow size, let's get up to like 2 millimeters. And you can see they show up now in this little preview, right? And there's other things like you can go and find the extension lines where it extends past the arrow, right? It's not extending past the arrow at all. That looks bad. Let's see, where extend beyond dimension lines right there. So just a few of these, you could just go in and put 2 millimeters in, right? And it's going to make a world of difference on what it looks like. Of course, I'd get rid of that precision too. But all these settings then will be saved in the template. You won't have to do this if you use the template, right? That's the point. So now it's starting to look pretty good. I'd probably still make sure I get a few more things done before I save it as a template. Like the unit, I probably don't want that kind of precision. I mean, in the drawing, you can always go change things, right? So this is just like a baseline setup, whatever you think you're going to use the most of, that kind of thing. What else was in there? So now it is using a period instead of a comma. That's good. That's right here. So it's, it's all in here. All right, let's look at it. Yeah, that's better. So I got my two layouts. In the end, typically you don't want anything in your template drawing wise. I actually leave something in there. So when I use my template, some kind of weird drawing comes in, but then I just erase it all. But it's kind of a reminder of how, what's ready and what's not. Like, I'd probably actually stick that in there too. See, I don't like that, how close that is to the text. That's some kind of dimension offset, right? It's still some micro millimeter thing. I'd probably fix that because that's annoying. But other than that, that dimensioning style is looking pretty good, right? So then when you get everything set, save as, and put it in a location, maybe do, some kind of a folder for templates, whatever you want. But this is just going to save it as a drawing. We're going to pull down the type of file to be an AutoCAD template file. Right there, DWT. Then it pops me into the systems template folder, and it's going to just add it in with the rest of them, right? If you want it near the top, start the name of it with the letter A because it's alphabetical, right? Or whatever. I call it, I just use my last name, but then I try to be descriptive. This is not a US template. This would be a metric, right? Good. All right, and then you hit save. It's going to say, hey, you can add a description and you can do a lot of different things. I'll just say, okay. Notice it changed the file type up here. This is a template. This now is a template, right? So I'm going to close it. I'm going to start a new drawing. And here's where I could choose, regular default ACAD. That doesn't have any of my settings in it. Right? That's just AutoCAD's default. No title blocks in there, nothing. Same with the ISO. Nothing in there for title blocks, and it has all the metric stuff. But if I use this one, that's my template, right? That has all the settings. I'm going to use it to start a drawing. Notice it says drawing 3, does not say template. So when you save this, you're saving a drawing. You're not messing with your template. That's the point. And then I'd probably just immediately erase this and get to work. I should have my title blocks here and my 2 pieces of paper, A and B size, ready to run. Right? I just didn't put a title block in there, but you would. Then you go through the whole mumbo jumbo again for the US version, but it's a little easier because the settings are better in dimensions for that. Questions? It's not too difficult. You just have to remember to save it as a template file, right? And then use it when you start a drawing, but don't open your template file and then do a drawing. And anyway, you can muck your template up if you do that. And then over time, if you're like setting up stuff that are just settings of AutoCAD, you can go back to your template and update that anytime, right? With new title blocks or another size piece of paper or whatever you want. But we shouldn't have to be recreating the title blocks and everything over and over. Good. All right, let's look at the exercise and then I will cut you to lab. This is the exercise here. So it's another one of these things where you have to read the grid points. Each grid distance is 1 millimeter. You don't know how big that is. It's like this big. So this is a very small object. Okay. It's metric. So you're going to want to use your metric template. You're supposed to make an orthographic projection. That is a front view, a right side view, and a top view with hidden lines if necessary, with dimensions. And we want 1/8 inch text on our dimensions or 3 millimeters if you want to just input the 3 millimeters. Right? Because it won't, if you put in an 1/8 in the text size, that's an 1/8 of a millimeter. That's really small. Okay. With a title block and use your template. So you're going to want to make your templates first and then go after this exercise. Good? All right, good luck. Start thinking about your project. I will put the project file up probably tomorrow if you want to look it over.
You start running that ISO.
If you want a metric, yep,
And a big metric.
yep. So you gotta use that template. And then do all your settings and then save it as a template. 'Cause it's gonna open a drawing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,